whakarongo ki te tangi a te korimako. Kōrero flowing out the hook of force. Kaupapa relevant, kaupapa out of bounds, kaupapa exigent, kaupapa paramount. Nā ko nā whakapiri mai ki te kaupapa tino whakahira whakarongo pi kari mai, areare mai, o Taringa hare mai. We gotta gather up close everybody, gather up close everybody. Kani move that body, kani move that body.
Hei ngā kāwai nui, hei ngā kāwai roa, onu nui mā, ororoa mā, o te ika, a Māui tiki a taranga whakawhiti i te mono rau kawa ki te wai pounamu, o tira ko nā moana e papaki mai nei, e papaki atu rā, te moana nui a kiwa, te moana tā pokopoko a tāwhaki, ngā tai miti a rehua, te tai o pautini, ngā tai katoa, nau mai hoki mai, all in one breath, e te iwi, nau mai hoki mai. Anei ki te punua pāho, o Taringa e whakapāho atu nei i te pokapū,
I ngā pokopu.
I ngā pokopu. Okay, I'll let you have that one. We're at home, whenua, from the bustling metropolis, te piki auahi o Te Awamutu, under the auspices of Te Wānanga o Aotearoa. And a shout out to Te Māngai Pāho, me irirangi te muti tēnā rā kouta e tautoko mai nei i te kaupapa tēnā tātou katoa e hoa mā o tira ngai Taringa nau mai hoki mai.
Nau mai hoki mai.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou.
Woohoo! I can feel it, I can feel it. I can feel it. Dun, 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 dun. Kei te rongo au I tētai waira.
I feel like this song's before my time.
It was, but it's a classic, you know. It is a classic. I mean, come on.
Michael is timeless.
Ana. Hoi anō Erika, tēnā tātou I tō huanga kua tai mai. Ane kua rangatira Taringa te puaheiri I tēnei rangatira o tātou kua tai mai. Me ki, ko te kōrero a te tui, kino moerua. Tahi a te marae, te kuti, te wera, te haua, ko apanui. Kei ware hoki ki tērā tātai o tēnei iho pū manoa, arā, he wiwi, he nāti. Ka huri rā ki te rohe o rua te kuka kore, arā, ko te aitanga haueti. Nō reira, Dayle Takitimu, tēnā koe, nau mai, haere mai, ane kia Taringa. Kia ora.
Kia ora rahuati, kia tātou.
Tēnā koe, welcome to our Waitangi special e te whānui o Taringa. Episode rua tekau mārima.
Mārima, kia ora.
Si! I tika. Ka pai, I always lose count. Hoi anō, e mihi ana kia koe Dayle, nau mai ki te punua pāho o Taringa. Lovely to have you with us on our Waitangi special. E nā ka whiua kia koe, kia kōrero mai koe. Nō whea koe, me rā kōrero katoa. Even though, you know, I did do a bit of a plug and
Yeah, that was a really good one.
Yeah, you know, if I was MC at Te Matatini, everybody would get a Meanez plug like that.
Hard out.
So Matatini would probably take another 2 days longer.
Hoi anō kei a koe, e te tuahine Dayle.
Kia ora Brown, and I can say if you were introducing at Te Matatini, you would not be introducing me. I seem to have been in the minority of my iwi that have not been born with that genetic strain. But kei te pai tēnā.
Ko tawa.
Kei te pai. So I he to mai te hau no te tai rāwhiti ki te taho tōku pāpa. Nās Pro on a good day. Te aitanga hauiti, of course, us down in Uawa and connecting up the Uawa trifecta, coming over to Te Whānau Apanui and the land of my nanny, but also the iwi that has generously taken me under their korowai and invested a lot of time and love in me and seeing if they could get this tamaiti to walk on the straight and narrow. And then we have whānau have connections through Te Moana Toi over to Naiterangi. And then on my mum's side, I come from mutineer stock. So we come from Norfolk Island, which are the mukupuna of the descendants of the Bounty. So I come from my tupuna, Fletcher Christian, who nicked off with the boat.
Yes.
And his Tahitian wife, known as Maimati in Hollywood, but known as Moatua to us within the whānau. And so they also have their own sovereignty battle going on at the moment with the British Crown. So I seem to have a strong DNA in opposition to colonisation. That's me, yeah.
Kia ora rā.
Kia ora.
Ai, rawera watu. Yeah, ka hoki aku whakaaro when I hear the Bounty. I'm watching the movie as a very young boy with my father. But my dad sailed to Norfolk Island when he was, I think he was 14. Him and his cousin sailed there. Yeah. Cool, eh? I think te kaumawha o na tau and his cousin was 16.
Ko he ke wera mautere?
Wainganui I tika Māui me ahi treiria.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I remember talking to my nan about it. My nan is Norfolk, born and raised in Te Reo, Era, mea, katoa. And I remember talking to her about, this injustice our tipuna had suffered as basically being called mutineers and treason against the crown and how this was unjust. And she sort of laughed at me, her mokupuna all inspired by justice and things like that, and said it was just a love story. He just wanted to stay with his missus. And he didn't want to go home. And, you look at winters in England compared to summers in Tahiti, and it's not a far stretch to see why one might get stroppy when you're told to go home.
Wa tēnā koe Dayle. Ana ka whiua hoki ki a koe, kai a koe tonu te wā. He kīwaha rānei tāu, he kīanga rānei tāu.
I whakaaro hau mō tēnei, and I guess just for me, like tētahi kōrero tino tata ki taku ngākau. Within, I guess, particularly the hapu at home that are ringatu, there's a saying, and I think, I puta mai nā kōrero a te kōti, te matua tangata, and it's just short, but it's kept me pretty focused as we've gone throughout the years of working. I tipu ake te pono I te whenua.
Kia ora. Tāhua.
He māma noiho te kōrero, he māma noiho ki te mau tēnā kōrero. And so I found it real easy, particularly when you're sort of knee-deep in Crown reforms over resource management and stuff, and you're thinking, what does this clause mean, and where are we going with this? And it's very grounding for me to go back I tipu ake te pono I te whenua.
I hi nawa taku kiri I tō kōrerotanga. I tērā kōrero, I tupu ake te pono I te whenua. Pai kia whakamārama koe ki te whānau e whakarongo mai nei hea te tikanga o tērā kianga no tō whakapono no te whakapono ringatu.
Yeah, so I guess probably for me, a lot of those learnings have come through our tuakana Rikirangi and his compositions and things like that, because not necessarily everyone in the iwi is beating a track up to his place to sit down and learn 17 verse more tea where those otherwise might be housed. So he's repackaged them, but within those waiata for matatini, while they're for entertainment, they also contain the kura of our iwi.
Kia ora.
And you might get it while you're learning it as a young person, but those things are just there for you to go back to later on and to access. And they might mean different things to you at different times in your life. So in particular, in his waiata whakarea mai tō aroha, that lyric comes up, I tipu ake te pono I te whenua, and to remind us that our truth is grounded in Papatuanuku, and our truth is grounded in te ao tūroa, te taiao, and we are tangata whenua here. And if you're lost or not sure or uncertain, you can just kick your jandals off and put your feet in the grass or the sand or your river, and you can get a connection there all the way back to Hawaii and all the wānanga, Hawaii wānanga that are then available to you, that you may not even be conscious of. You may not even be a conscious orchestrator of that connection or that learning. But for me, I find it balancing and something that is always a good reset, particularly when things get a bit clunky in life or in a work project that you're doing, and you just, particularly in times of frustration, just kia hoki ki te whenua, kia maumahara koe, I tipu ake te pono I te whenua.
Kia ora mai.
Kia ora.
Pupu ana aku kare aroto.
I might have peaked too early.
And our waiata for this week is...
No, I'm totally lost, engulfed in the wairua of te kōrero.
Me too.
Because me pono au, kua rongo au I te kōrero rā, engari kāreu I tino mōhio ki te I marama. I marama ki te tikanga o te kōrero rā. And it's timely for me with some of the mahi I'm doing at the moment. So, e mihi anau ki a koe, tēnā koe. Tēnā rawati koe. What are we talking about again? I just want to talk about that.
Yeah. Well, there's a good segue there in talking about I tipu ake te pono I te whenua, and with regards to your mahi as a lawyer, but within treaty issues, tuahine. Kōrero mai, wētahi kaupapa e hāngai ana ki taua kōrero.
Ko te katoa.
Hey.
Te katoa tōku mahi, that is kōrero that I take into every bit of mahi that I do and have done for some time. And I have a tāmoko on my right waiwai that was put there by Uncle Mark Kopua that reminds me, I asked him to put it on my foot because I was walking the streets of the terrace in Lambton Quay and through Parliament and different government departments advocating for the iwi at that point. And I just think to him, I just really, when I get up in the morning and put that foot forward and then every step I take, I want to be reminded that that is a connection through to where I belong to, underneath all the asphalt and all the traffic lights and all that sort of stuff. That whenua and that connection is always there and available to me. So I think for myself and other people, certainly other lawyers would have other ways of, I guess, professional self-care and your own ethics. But for me, it's really captured a lot in that kōrero because it doesn't overcomplicate things for me. Tika me te pono, those are the things that we just get drummed into from a young age. Te tika me te pono, people ask for lots of complicated codes of conduct and those sorts of things to dress up legal words around things often, but sometimes the best answers are the most simple. And so in all of the work that I've done, particularly when you're dealing with the Crown who have their own narrative, perhaps that's the biggest thing I've learnt now that I've been a lawyer in this field for far too long. Oh, hika, just trying to count up the years now, nearly 28 years. So in all of that, you get thrown a lot at you that is contrary to that kōrero and tries to have you believe that pono is sourced somewhere else. And law making is sourced somewhere else, and the authority for law is sourced somewhere else. And a lot of times you get that thrown at you in 101 different ways throughout the day as a lawyer, particularly when you're like me working as a lawyer in somebody else's system, a system that's been imported here. So I guess in that, when I'm playing colonial lawyer, which is different to Indigenous law, of course. And so in that space, that kōrero comes through all the time. And it comes through, again, with treaty jurisprudence and things when you're talking about the treaty, because, of course, that I grew up, I think, probably in an Aotearoa that a lot of others, my generation, grew up in, where you were, if you might have got 2 weeks, a week maybe, in social studies about the Treaty of Waitangi. And that starts off probably with a picture of the Endeavour. In the social studies textbook. The social studies textbook I learnt from at school was written the year before I was born. Wow. So anyway, but by the time I got to high school, we were recycling, reusing and all that sort of stuff. But it's the continuation of a narrative, right? And it's flawed. And so you get this picture of the Endeavour, and then they sort of talk about the coming of the British, and then they say the Treaty of Waitangi was signed on the 6th of February, 1840, full stop. Next sentence, which almost inevitably follows, is the Treaty of Waitangi is a treaty of cession. It ceded sovereignty to the Crown. And right about there is where I tipu ake te pono I te whenua kicks in and says, hang on, is that consistent with the truth I know? Is that consistent with my tipuna's truth? Is that consistent with our waiata, with our haka, with our whakaaro, with those things that actually resonate and have grown from this land? And about then you start to scratch and say, no, that's not consistent with our truth whatsoever. And in fact, it's not consistent with the evidence on the papers either. So it's a good reminder and a good anchor point, but especially when you're in the minority, which I have often found myself in my career also, where you might be the only person advocating that within a room of, 30 Crown officials or industry leaders or whatever, and they're telling you one thing is an absolute truth, an absolute colonial truth, and you have to recall, no, hang on, Kia tū koe me haumama te waha, you have an obligation to at least put on the record that there is more than one truth in play in this room.
Kia ora. So you said when you learnt in social studies, it was the 6th of February 1840, signed in Waitangi. However, there must be a different perspective as to the perspective of your iwi and clients or the people you've represented. How te tirohanga ki te tiriti, hei tā te tirohanga apanui? What's the perspective of the treaty from your point of view, from the people that you've represented, or your whānau, or your hapu and iwi that you've represented?
Yeah, and in regards to apanui, which I suppose I have, can kōrero about with a bit more clarity. In apanui, we say he tapu te tiriti.
Kia ora.
E kawanata tapu. So it is a sacred relationship between us and another party. And we honour the tipuna who signed that on the 14th of June, 1840, down in Maraitai.
Kia ora.
Just by te kā. And we name them. We name our kids after them. we keep their kōrero alive in Waiata and those sorts of things. And then, of course, you'll see through our iwi history has been the strong influence of te hāhi ringatu, but also te kotahitanga. And so a lot of the kōrero coming through the kotahitanga movement, particularly in the Waiata of Tuininawa and those sorts of things, are very instructional about one of Kokatuini's Waiata te kotahitanga, her last paragraph is te tiriti o Waitangi, hei oranga Māori e. So it's about, I guess, being true to a long thread of narrative that is ours and not accepting necessarily that somebody else came along on a particular date with a different perspective and a different agenda and has the ability to upset and unrest and call into question all of your oral tradition. There's value in that, and that is tied very closely in with our DNA and our subconscious. So to put that down and believe what we're being asked to believe around these colonial fictions that serve a different agenda, what I would call a crown supremacy agenda, where the crown is the ultimate authority and single authority of the land. To be asked to accept that is actually to be asked to put down all of that history that's gone behind you and put down those things that are so deeply coded, in fact, into our DNA and into our subconscious, that you find if you do put those things down and jump into this, it's a treaty of cession, we gave it all away to the crown, and it's our bad luck that we have not survived or thrived in that scenario. You see, we actually create an internal conflict within our own beings, what our tipuna's truth were and what we've been asked to subscribe to. And so I guess it doesn't always make you popular amongst your peers or amongst those that are committed to a treaty of cession and a crown supremacy world. But for me, that is as much self-care as anything else, to say I will be true to my tipuna in a way that champions their truth. Because, see, what people are asking me to believe, if we say on the 6th of February or 14th of June, 1840, wherever it was signed by your tipuna around the country, that was a treaty of absolute cession to the crown and we didn't retain any right or authority to ourselves. What they're asking you to believe in, this is a kōrero that Moana Jackson is very strong about, is that up to the 5th of February, 1840, our tipuna defended the territory and the territorial integrity of Te Whānau Apanui from Te Taumata Apanui to Pōtikirua, and anyone that came within those boundaries, we would defend the integrity of those boundaries. We're often at war with our relations on the Ngāti side, but also some people who came to transgress our seaward boundaries to come in and give our whanaunga their beans and stuff like that. They're asking us to say our tipuna would defend with their lives, absolutely, our territory and our mana up until the 5th of February, but somewhere miraculously overnight, I don't know if it was a big party at Waitangi or what they're trying to have us believe, they woke up on the 6th of February and said, man, can't be bothered now. You fellas have it.
Yeah. Seed, nah.
Yeah, now that's just not believable to me. What that's asking me to believe is that my tupuna were stupid and that my tupuna were idiots. And I know without a doubt that's not the case. They outstripped me in terms of intelligence 100-fold. They were operating on a different level a lot of the time. And so I can't and won't believe that that's the case, that we miraculously had some sort of shift, major tectonic shift in our worldview altogether overnight on the 5th of February or in Apanui on the 13th of June, and woke up the next morning and said, we think actually we're not going to do this anymore. We don't mind about everyone else coming in and stampling all over our mana. We'll just me ho atu ki tētahi wāhine, kaore anō koe kua kitea. Like it's mythical that would have happened. I mean, we got scraps we named the beaches and the rocks and different events throughout the iwi over scraps and skirmishes with our neighbours and stuff over time, or intermarriages. Apanui's border with Ngaitai. Well, it has been contentious in the past. About the time where our tipuna Apanui married the sisters, Te Whaki and Te Kohipare, all of a sudden you create a little Monaco kind of situation where Ngaitai left in their own integrity by a big te whakatohe on one side and Apanui on the other, because there's these strategic intermarriages.
Yeah, true.
And so those sorts of things are how we did things. We certainly didn't sign a piece of paper and say, naho, here you go.
Yeah.
So, some of it's just fanciful. And it's one of those things that you repeat the fiction enough times and then you layer other things on that fiction and you create textbooks and people don't stop and question it. Who's going to, and it just becomes layered on. And so people have in the past obviously stopped and questioned it, and back in the kōtahitanga days and other movements that have popped up over time and things like that. But I think it is up to us to continue doing that in our generation rather than accepting it.
Yeah, wow. I remember when you gave us that amazing presentation and we were talking about the East Coast version. It talked about that the iwi and hapu would actually retain all of their taonga. But I remember you saying that not all the other versions say that.
They are all slightly different. I quite like ours because it's kind of like the grand trifecta of all of, of the different variations that are sitting out there. So where some people might have got full and undisturbed possession or full and exclusive possession, we got the wording full, exclusive and undisturbed. So I sort of felt like there was a doubling down on that. But the bottom line is they just didn't have Xerox machines back in those days. Kids probably don't even know what they are. They didn't have scanners, kids, back in those days. And so somebody had to sit up at Waitangi and write them all out by hand. And I don't know, if he was well paid or not or what, but he set up throughout the night and copied out the different versions of Te Tiriti at that point, and then they were sent, sort of often by horseback or by boat around the country. So they're all a little bit different. There wasn't spell check and grammar check and those sorts of things back in those days. But here's part of the issue. Article 1 talks about the recognition of an authority, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't create an authority, and it's really important for us to remember that Te Tiriti o Waitangi doesn't create anything for us. Mm. It recognises rights that already existed.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
We didn't need the crown here for all the generations before 1840 to create a full system of tikanga and education and those sorts of things. We were functioning full societies before they came along. And that is not disputed. Every historian, pānga or not, will tell you that. We were fully functioning societies in our own right. So the first article recognises a type of authority. The issue for the British Crown and now the New Zealand government is it does not displace the sovereignty that is already here.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
It doesn't say the Crown have got something and therefore now you Māori don't. What it does say is that it will recognise, and this is part and parcel, they say, of the history of what unruly settlers were up to and those sort of things, does create an authority for the British Crown in respect of their subjects here. The fiction that's been told is that's a treaty of cession, and you had your mana all intact 5th of February 1840, and then woke up 6th of February 1840 and gave it all away, and now we've got it all. That's the fiction we've been asked as what they called in law school the orthodox theory of the Treaty of Waitangi, which I thought was perverse and insulting. But anyway, nevertheless, it's the Crown and Crown Department's version of it. So what they do is they take that very simplistic and, in fact, wrong interpretation of Article 1, and they say, we're going to call that absolute. And they often stop reading the treaty there, even though it's only a short paragraph thing. They just get too lazy to keep reading. And what you must see is Article 2, which fetters all of that and creates a limit and a restriction on that, because Article 2 is what in international law would be called territorial rights. So Article 2 says, for us in the version that we signed in Apanui, it shall be guaranteed to the hapu, to the rangatira of ngā hapu. So it's centred at a hapu level, not an iwi level, not a PSG level, not any other macro level, at a hapu level, because that's where the authority was being exercised at the time. In Apanui, we've kind of stayed pretty hapuized. So they talk about being guaranteed unto the rangatira of the hapu full, exclusive and undisturbed possession of our lands, forests, fisheries, kāinga and all other taonga. So weti, really, eh?
Weti.
Like, that's a bloody good deal.
Yeah.
I'd take that deal. That's awesome.
I'll sign
it's inconvenient for the Crown that Article 2 is sitting there like that. And one of the best bits of Article 2, which is often knocked off and forgotten about, is the phrase at the bottom of that article, which says, for as long as they shall wish to retain them.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Two positive obligations that come from that. One, a positive obligation on us as mokopuna to say, Erama, your tipuna just ring-fenced all these huge rights. And if you think of everything that's in the definition of kāinga, everything that's in the definition of taonga, they've ring-fenced them and said, guaranteed unto you absolutely full, exclusive and undisturbed possession. So there's a positive obligation on us as mokopuna not to say, we don't want to retain them, to surrender accidentally or on purpose our rights to retain them. And the other positive obligation I think that creates is on the Crown to say, when you're coming in here thinking you're going to regulate our land or our moana or our fisheries or our people, you need to show where in history we've said we no longer wish to retain that right, because I can't remember when our iwi did that. Can you? We asked them to point to that. You show us the time when Te Whanua Apanui as a collective came to you and said, you know what, you fellas regulate the fisheries. We don't want to regulate that anymore. And we expressly say that. You show me when that happened. And I, as a mokopuna, if you had that evidence, would have to say, oof, okay, hang on. Hang on, because you're bound by the collective as much as anything. But the reality is the Crown can't show that evidence because it never happened. What it means is that somewhere along the line, which is always the case in my experience, somewhere along the line, the Crown have assumed that right to regulate that estate. Not we've given it to them, not that we've expressly said we no longer wish to retain it, but rather they've jumped in and said, well, we think under Article 1, and we're like, hang on, taiwa. So, yeah, for me, it really regularly comes back to the tipuake te pono i te whenua, because I understand the simplicity of that truth that comes from the earth.
Kia ora. Dayle, I want to throw a curveball here.
Of course you do.
I'm a non-Māori and I want to know in plain sight where are the benefits of me or New Zealand government honouring the treaty and its absolute principles?
Well, first of all, I'm going to tackle my pet peeve before I answer the question. I don't believe in the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. It's a bullshit invented by the Crown and continued to be perpetrated throughout. So it's a colonial fiction. So as I've said, like with the wording of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, full, exclusive and undisturbed possession for as long as they shall wish to retain them. They're simple, right? We can understand what that means. Nāhau. Right. What happens is that becomes inconvenient for the Crown because then they have to deal with you as an authority on your land. So they say, well, hang on. The words don't really work for us. And very quickly tapped into a Māori mindset and said, why don't we talk about the spirit, the wairu of the treaty, the vibe that it gives us about partnership. So why don't we say it's a partnership?
Puruheti.
He hoa tēnā ki au, because it's like the legal contract. Someone comes to you with a legal contract, and a treaty is really a legal contract of international sort of implications in terms of between sovereign peoples, right? So we come down into basic contract law, and someone comes to you with a guy who's got a contract written down and says, this guy over there is breaching the contract all day, every day, and I want to cancel it. And you got to be his lawyer, and you walk into a meeting with the other side, and the other side says to you, look, we know we're breaching that all over the place, but could we just go with the spirit of it? But that doesn't work in contract law, which is sort of where some of that jurisprudence comes from. So I'm like, no, I don't need to go to the spirit of it, because the words suit me just fine. I understand the words. They're in your language and in mine. And both ways, they don't help you. They help the truth that I've been raised to believe. So that's the first thing, is I don't, and government's obsession with the principles, because what they do then is then they say where we had a dual authority, or in fact more than dual, because Māori went all lumped in together, we were autonomous hapu, so it's multilateral treaties. So where we had multiple authorities in this country, they say, actually, should we just smush that into and call it partnership?
Yeah, and use it all Māori. Yeah.
And then we talk about full exclusive understood possession. So the Crown, as you know, have reduced that right down over modern years to the right to be consulted. And very often your consultation is ignored anyway, they go ahead and do it. That's not full exclusive and understood possession. Well, the fullness of our rights and interests and obligations is contained in the actual wording, not in the principles. Yeah, that's sort of where I have some of the issue with the Crown obsession with the principles, because they suit them, but they're not us. The words suit us just fine. And I'm like, get back to the original contract you signed. It said full exclusive understood. Now, what benefit is there for them? One, it would legitimise their right to be here if they properly honoured Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Because on the one hand, the Crown want to say to us, it's not legally binding, actually, now that we think about it. It's really just, it's the spirit of the nation, part of the fabric of the nation, but it's not technically legally binding. But it's like, well, then you've got no authority to have houses of parliament or to regulate anything. Yeah, the Crown gets all of its legitimacy here from that document. So if they want to say it means nothing, I'm like, well, you can't have it both ways and say it means nothing, but then it anchors your authority to be here.
Tēnā koe.
Yeah, so with that, I would say if they properly honoured Te Tiriti o Waitangi, they could be world leaders in legitimising their actual right to be here and on the basis that was properly given by the Indigenous people. Second of all, I think in a world where we're coming up to massive climate change disruption, massive economic system disruption that we're seeing at the moment, Indigenous lifeways and worldviews are going to be what everyone is clinging on to in the future. And in fact, they've already started it in multiple places around countries, governments, including ours, around the world are starting to tap into this idea of an Indigenous worldview and what could it mean for how we do things better. So they'll come to mine our intellect for that soon. They are doing that already now.
Yep.
Well, what we're saying to them is you can't have the mātauranga without the rangatiratanga underpinning it. That's not a discussion because again, it's just pickpocketing. It's pickpocketing and oppressed people to save a system that we never really agreed to in the first place. So I think there's massive moral and spiritual benefits. That's probably not going to be a huge motivator in a commercial world. But I also think there's massive environmental and humanitarian benefits globally in Indigenous peoples taking decision-making lead on these massive kaupapa that affect us.
Wow.
Rawe.
Ka nui te pai.
Kei te hihi noho e te noho me te whakarongo.
Ai.
The population is changing so fast that very soon, if not now, their mokopuna are Māori or will be Māori.
Ai, when they become the minority.
They are going to become oppressors of themselves and their descendants if they don't sort equity out in a proper way. It's going to take a courageous move to do that. But it's going to be up to us, one, whether we shy away from it as a country, or two, for Māoridom, whether we insist on it. And I have to be honest, some of the insisting has quietened down over the last few years. We've become a comfortable but stroppy sort of minority, but not as stroppy as you used to see when we got the big changes that came after the Land March and those original New Zealand Māori council cases. Incidentally, one of them was taken over te reo and created, of course, what then became some push for equitable funding, tautawhiri and stuff like that. But the big legal issue in play there was defining te reo as a taonga. So those that are old enough will remember back in those days, we all had the bumper sticker, he taonga te reo, and those sorts of things. And that is because up until that case, in international law, taonga had never been asserted as being intangible. The people had thought it was korowai and mere and the pounamu and those sorts of things, or different houses that had been taken around the world to museums and stuff like that. And Māori said, no, we think te reo is endangered and we think it is a taonga. And so if they were able to get it defined as a taonga or within that definition, they could advocate for some protection for it. And that's exactly what they were able to achieve with the Privy Council case, to have it declared legitimately within our definition of taonga. See, that's another thing about the narrative and controlling the narrative and reclaiming the narrative, is we must not let other people define our terminology for us. I had a young Crown lawyer not long ago say to me, almost apologetically in a meeting I was there, that he didn't think that's what te auranga or te taiao meant. And I respectfully said he may not be the best authority on that and what was included in the definition or not, if he couldn't even say it properly. But the issue for me is they were trying to legislatively define something they didn't understand. And it's like we got to stop letting them do that, and we've got to stop letting our truth kind of get swept away in that. So we've been having some interesting language discussions because they're about who controls the narrative that goes alongside these things. And I firmly believe now, and this might be a realization probably in the last 5 years for me, but an Indigenous nation who is not actively investing in its artists and its composers and its storytellers and the keepers of the narrative will not seriously be able to be on a track towards self-determination. And self-determination is going to require our prioritization of that class of people, because it's essential to the mental apparatus that is required to hold rangatiratanga. You have to believe in it, and you can't believe in it until you've got all the contextual kōrero and narrative around it. And so definitely I think the prioritization of the investment in our artists and our storytellers, our songwriters, our haka composers, those sorts of disciplines is really, really important. And the curriculum builders, of course, is getting into the subconscious of our people and our kids, because that's how it got taken out. As we took out e pātō reo and all the richness of the kura inside that, and that was replaced with Humpty Dumpty and Jack and Jill and Goldilocks, which is the ultimate sort of case of white privilege, where she just rocks on into someone's house and starts helping herself and then moaning about how comfortable the moinga was. But those sorts of, we get fed that, and it's a swap out. So what we have to do is consciously invest in the regeneration of those things, and we have to do that if we've got any hope in making political headway, because otherwise it's just a thin facade that we're saying we have these rights, but we actually haven't got a whakapono that puts the weight of 100,000 tipuna behind it. And that's what we need. We need the belief in that, and it's our storytellers and our poets and those people that generate and regenerate and reinstill those things in us. It's woefully needed at a time like this, and I don't think I could stress that enough, like how important that is. And I'll tell you how important I think it is. I've been doing some research in pursuit of the elusive PhD, which, never gets time on my dance card. So, I might just hang around until I'm old enough to give me an honorary one.
Another 28 years.
How long till they start? Yeah. But part of my PhD research has been in the design architecture behind colonisation. And where we are in 2022 as the people, or as groups of people, groups of hapu, groups of iwi, we are not here by accident. We are here by design. We're here by absolute design. We're not here by moral inferiority or some sort of genetic inferiority. We are here by an architectural design in colonisation that was rolled out according to a template across multiple different countries. So some of the text out of our treaty can be seen as the same phrases that's used in treaties in the Congo, the African Congo. And then you've got Canada, Australia, America, the four buddies basically shared stories. And this is not unknown, or it's not like some conspiracy theory I've got. One of the major architects of all of that back in the day was a guy, Edward Gibbon Wakefield, who Wakefield Street in Wellington is named after, and multiple other places. He was physically going between Canada and New Zealand, swapping the strategic notes and holding wānanga how to do this, how to colonise. There's a book entered into the Westminster Library around that same time entitled How to Colonise, and it's a blow-by-blow account of what you should do. Now, the first thing they do in every country they've been to colonise, the British, is they take out the poets, the storytellers, the spiritual leaders.
Tōhunga Suppression Act.
The Tōhunga Suppression Act. And it's not about how many people are persecuted under that or who went to jail or whatever. It's about the moral chilling and putting some sort of tapu on our own stories and saying enough of that being native and being savage. Here's the new world. And they often did that on the back of a Bible, unfortunately. Call it toxic Christianity, because it's not the same as Christianity, which of its own right you may not have an issue with. But politically powered toxic Christianity is something quite different, where they've used Christianity as the sort of tail to get them in the door and then swap out narratives.
That was the waka. The waka.
It definitely was. So it's an intentional design architecture then that we have to be strategic about how to deconstruct. And if they took our poets and our storytellers and our tohunga first, we must replace them and reinvest in them first, because it's a massive clue that they target the psyche before they got the land. And they did that very cleverly in New Zealand, where they got us to the point where we were almost colonising ourselves in the land forts. And you see that even in today's circumstances, because we've bought into the system, and they got us to buy into the system because they replaced our mental and emotional loyalty to one worldview and swapped it out with another. Now, they did that over successive generations. In New Zealand, it happened faster than it's happened nearly anywhere in the world, the pace of it, because they'd got good at it by the time they got here and well-versed in how to do it. So you see, even in Apirana Ngata's days, when they're talking about curriculum changes, etahi and stuff like that, already they started to talk about, like, you know, from 1856, there's debates in the House of Lords about this, all the way through to quite modern examples. And why we've sort of said, you know, things like kura kaupapa and kohanga reo can't be about a translated Crown curriculum. They have to be genuinely a return to our curriculum and the championing of our worldviews, our atua, our kaitiaki, our natural rhythms and those sorts of things. Because that, I think, is the strength behind any political or legal fight we can have.
Nui atu te pai o ngā kōrero nei.
I'm ready for my board meetings.
You're fired up.
Well, it's just, you know, like when you're talking, I mean, I roto I taku ngākau e mōhio anau, but you've kua pūhou, taku titiro, ki tāku e tautoko nei I runga I ngā puari e noho anau. And for me, it's another way, another perspective to offer some of my fellow board members.
Kia ora.
It's been a great reset for me, to be honest. Tēnei kōrero rero, tēnei wānanga I tēnei ahi, kāre aku pātai, kao he mihi.
Ai. Pēho ki tau, tuahine, pātai.
I do have a pātai, but also want to agree with Paraone. I too, like your kōrero has got me fired up.
Yeah.
In a good way. In a good way, charged. But okay, what would it mean for the treaty if all of a sudden we turned into a republic tomorrow?
New Zealand will still, whether it turns into a republic or not, or you know, severs its ties with the Commonwealth or not, will still need to wrestle with the moral underpinnings of our nation.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
And if we try to rush that and become a republic without doing that, we're just going to invite the same issues we've got right now. They will be unresolved. And so we still need to wrestle with that. Some people have said turn the Treaty of Waitangi into a piece of law. A lot of people don't want that because it would come under the authority of the mana of Parliament, which is problematic. It sort of currently sits outside that and probably still should. But yeah, I think probably one of the greatest, talking about going into board meetings and those sorts of things, sometimes I feel a little bit, felt a little bit at odds about claiming that space or wanting to claim that space in terms of our own truth and stuff like that, because sometimes it's really difficult to look around and think, but why don't we believe in us?
Kia ora.
Why don't we believe in our own mātauranga? We sing about it. And we haka about it, and we have all these repositories of knowledge that we are now, I fear, interacting with at that very surface kind of level instead of kia ruku hōhunu. And it's like, if you believe in yourself, in our rangatiratanga and our legitimate right to it, then it's a matter of inside those day-to-day meetings where it might just be about a governance board for this trust or that trust or whatever, to say, but why do we do that? And why are we doing it like that? But is that us? And we've just this morning, in fact, had a major reset of one of our work streams. Was just by the swamp it ended up in at the end of last year, it just became really crown captured. And it was time for us to go back to the awa, literally, and put the feet in the awa and just and say, hang on, this is a simple relationship and I am entitled to it. I'm entitled to the relationship all the way through my being, through my whenua, through my mauri, everything, through my feet, into the whenua, all the way back, the super galactic superhighway back to Hawaii, the Hawaii within me, and all the wānanga that come with nā ke te mātauranga, all of our, the stories Uncle Mark and all them sit around talking about and stuff like that. It's like, kei roto i a tātou tēnā. It's rich and it's beautiful, and that's what we have to offer ourselves before we offer it to the rest of the nation. I understand why we've got to a point where we don't have masses of the population that feel comfortable believing in that, because that is part of the architecture of colonisation. But that's why the investment in the shift away. So that all that's going into your kids' ears all day is the songs from Macy or Rob or whoever that are reaffirming he rangatira koe rungi tēnei whenua. And, those returns to our own truths are simple but effective acts of resistance in our own right.
Tēnā rā wātu koe, kei te rangatira. Kua rangatira Taringa i a koe. And Erica, I'm going to jump in there. Aha ko Republic, ka ūtonu rā nei ki te krauna, i runga i te kōrero nei tupu ake te pono i te whenua, kei reira te whakautu ki taua pātai. Ko ngā tini mano tātai i muri kei runga, kei roto, i a tātou, kei runga i a tātou, ka ūtonu. Aha kua Republic, aha kua krauna. Kare tērā mana, tērā tapu e pātaihia, kare hoki e waimeha. I roto e rātu āhuatanga. Nō reira kamihi kia koe, kei te pirangi au kia haere tonu nā kōrero.
Koe hoki.
Engari, e mihi ana kia koe, kei te uri o te rā whioro, o tira, te mokopuna poraurangi, te mātāta rāwhare tuhi mārekura rauru, ko tō huanga tēnei, e mihi nei kia koe, panui tēnā koe, ka pai te rongo i ngā ingoa o tāua kui o te whāki o te kohe pare. Ko tainui waka tēnei mihi nei. Mātou tokotoru e whakamānawa nei, me tō huanga hoki e noho nei. Nāna rā tātou i whakatūtaki. Kia rere ai ngā kōrero e pāna, e pāna ki te mana o te Māori.
Yeah.
Haunga te tiriti o Waitangi, ko te mana o te Māori, ko te ora o te Māori, ko te mana o tātou mātua tūpuna i roto i a tātou. Nō reira, e mihi ana ki a koe mātou tokotoru o tira Taringa whānui me ngā rima te kaumano, te rima te kaumano tāngata ka whakarongo ki a Taringa, e mihi ana ki a koe, tēnā koe.
Kia ora. Oh, well, mihi atu kia koutou, kia tātou mo tēnei kōrero. He kōrero paumāhu mo te timatanga o te tau. Kia whakamaumahara i a hau anō. Kia whakapono tātou i roti a tātou anō. Aha ko te aha. To have a trust in ourselves, in our tupuna, and to have a belief, I think, is the strongest way for us to start a year. Aha kōnā piki me nā heke o te krauna. That for me is probably my take home after this many years of practice in this space is we got to hold our own. We have to absolutely hold our own. And that's an easy thing to do once we get used to doing it.
Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe tuhene.
Au wahi ana.
I runga i tērā kōrero e te iwi, ko te wairua o tērā kōrero maranga.
Maranga.
I runga i tērā, anei tā tātou waiata, Aotearoa maranga, whakarongo mai.
Freedom from oppression, 'cause that's what my people need. So when you hear me, Malanga ke ai, Akwane, Malanga ke ai, I said it soon come now. How much longer must we keep on talking? A million miles already, and we still go walking. All my life I get taught about the right of the great white way. I said, how much longer before we get up and say, what people? Malanga ke ai, ai, etahi, malanga ke ai. I said it soon come down. No more knocking on closed doors. I said, Maori people, gotta wake up, gotta take up the course. Can you feel it coming? A brand new time. I said, Aotearoa, maranga ake ai. Maranga ake ai, ai, ai. Aotearoa, maranga ake ai. I said it soon come down. I said it soon come now. Whoa, 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 whoa. Wake up, people, to a
Did you know that guy's a judge now? Justice Joe Williams, that was singing.
Judge Dredd.
Oh.
And did you know the other one singing in there is te rangatira o te taurewhiri o te reo Māori?
Koia hoki.
Ana.
So from the arts to some high-powered places. That's what I want to nail was the point that she made, how important our arts are to be socially valued. And I thought she raised a really good point because even myself, you start turning towards corporate things because you believe that that's a way for the future of our people. However, it's still in our arts. Our arts meaning haka, tāmoko, where they're romanticised, but they're not very valued. I mean, how many of us like ask a bro or a whanaunga to make them a carving or a taonga, but they don't treasure it as much as they would buy, I don't know, a handbag from Italy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Or you'd pay a stranger to come build your deck or whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard out.
There's so much to take away from that, especially like the bit at the end. And I think we should reframe Waitangi Day to believe in our tipuna / believe in ourselves day.
Yeah.
It was a reinvigoration of some things that have been e moi ana I roto I oku whakaaro. And reaffirming, it was just great. It was good timing for me I tēnei wā o te tau.
Aye. Mō tātou, because that did the same thing for me. And it is true, it's true generationally, a lot of us, or I know we've been lucky recipients of some big movers and shakers. And she talked about people getting, she didn't use complacent, but that's the same sense I get.
No, it was.
And, you know, that is just another reminder, bro, what is your thing? You know, not a major responsibility, but, you know, and what's your, how rānei tō koha?
What's your contribution?
What's your contribution, yeah. So that was me. That was massive.
Hoi anō, I'm looking forward, e hoa mā, to going back and listening to that one.
Yeah.
But when I go to the gym and I hit the gym, I think it'll be...
Reinvigorating.
Oh man, he's listening to some hardcore stuff. And so, yeah, you guys might be travelling again to go to various places for Waitangi or just to be with whānau. Have a discussion with your whānau. You know, we've got really intersecting whānau these days. You know, there could be a lot of guilt coming up. There could be some things that you didn't know about yourself. You know, one of the pātai I wanted to ask Dayle was, what are the benefits for Māori having a treaty? So perhaps that's a question you can ask yourselves and you can have a wānanga around a barbecue or while you're diving or while you're driving to your destinations.
Yeah, or just having a wānanga with yourself and internalising a lot of the kōrero that came out I tēnei hōtaka.
Kia ora.
Yeah. E rere tonu ana ngā mihi ki ai o tira ki a tātai e hoa mā, e ora katoa ana taku ngākau I tā tātai noho tahi. I tēnei rā, I tēnei te rangi I muri tonu mai I te whānautanga mai o Tahu Pōtiki Weremu Rātana.
Kia ora.
Te rua te kaumārima o Hānuere, ana hāngai tonu ana, āna nei whāinga, ana ki ngā kōrero I puta I te rānei. Nō reira koutou e ngā morehu, ngā mihi hoki kia koutou, o tira tātou ngai taringa me ngā iwi, whakarongo mai ki tēnei hōtaka o taringa. If you're in a taringa huru, which I'm going to rebrand as someone that's been listening to taringa for a while.
Koia.
Ne? He taringa huru. He taringa hou rānei. E mihi ana ki a koutou, ko mātou tokotoru e nei, e mihi atu nei. Meki, toko whā, kei konei hoki a mōkena. Te tangata kei muri, te tuarā o te kaupapa. E mihi atu ana ki a koutou. Tēnā rā koutou katoa, hei kona mai rā.
Hei kona.
Hei kona.
Te mā morehu.
Bit whakarongo, bit kari. Gather up close, everybody, buddy. Taringa. Yeah, tahuri mai ki yo. Whakarongo ki te tangi a te kori mako. Kōrero flowing out the hook of force. Kaupapa relevant, kaupapa out of bounds. Kaupapa exigent, kaupapa paramount. Nā kona whakapiri mai ki te kaupapa tino whakahira. Whakarongo pi kari mai. Areare mai, o taringa hare mai. We gotta gather up close, everybody. Gather up close, everybody. Kani move that body. Kani move that body.
Taringa, he mea tuku nā te wānanga o Aotearoa, nā te māngai pāho me irirangi te motu I tautoko. To listen to more episodes, search for us on your podcast app and subscribe, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Taringa, whakarongo mai.